Far Cry 3 is one of the most confusing games I've ever played. On one hand, it's trying to be serious and ask us to question our violence, while on the other it's silly, with blockbuster escape sequences that feel like we're playing COD, alongside immature humour and some questionable characters. At times, Far Cry 3 feels like we're riding a roller coaster and being forced to think about the dangers of speeding. This is of course the point. During development, Ubisoft tried to distance themselves from Far Cry 2, a game that was ultimately disappointing. Although sales were good and the critical reception positive, Far Cry 2 wasn't a runaway success. A lot of people hated the game and found its hardcore systems too frustrating, even if I personally think it's a masterpiece. The leads from Far Cry 2 were replaced by 2010, and the new team wanted to bring their own ideas to the table. They wanted to make Far Cry 3 less frustrating, and instead focus on fun. This meant mechanics like malaria and weapon degradation were abandoned, and the hostile open world was turned into a playground, full of activities and prizes. But as the team sanded down Far Cry 2's rough edges, they went too far. They unintentionally diluted the best parts of combat and stealth by giving us too much power, and the great changes they made that work in the first half of the game fall off in the second, and everything becomes repetitive. Although Far Cry 3's simplicity is refreshing compared to how bloated Ubisoft games are today, it's just a shame that in making the franchise more accessible, we lost too much along the way. As soon as we start Far Cry 3, the difference from Far Cry 2 is immediately made clear to us. Instead of passing through military checkpoints with the aftermath of war all around us, we see our main character Jason partying with his friends, set to paper planes by MIA, like we're watching a music video. Gone is the dull African desert. This is a lush tropical paradise, where instead of battling a malaria infection, we're diving into pools of crystal clear water and swimming with turtles. In Far Cry 2, we almost died during the first encounter in the game, as Ubisoft was showing us that we were fragile in this dangerous world. But in Far Cry 3, Ubisoft went the other way. Instead, we're shown that we're the main character in an action film, as we run away from enemy bullets that somehow only graze us, before falling off a rickety bridge like we're on a theme park ride. From this opening moment, we're shown that Far Cry 3 is all about spectacle. That's not to say darker themes aren't still present, it's just they aren't constant like they were before. It's easy to forget about them as we kick back with a few rounds of poker or whiz around on a jet ski. Although this is partly responsible for Far Cry 3's confused vision, which we'll talk about later on, a lot of these changes are a big improvement, especially to the open world. The open world has now been gamified to make sure we earn upgrades as we clear the map. We're working towards a new skill or a brand new weapon we vied for our loadout. And yet, the bow is incredible, the wingsuit is genius. They add so much fun to the game that it's easy to see why they're staples of the franchise to this day. The collectibles are the best change here, as they also reward us with signature weapons or syringe recipes. The collectibles are not shown to us on the map by default, which means that the only way we discover them is through exploration, by branching out on our own to explore the open world. Most of the time, we'll see something interesting on the horizon that piques our interest, like a washed-up shipwreck or the entrance to a cave. And most times, if we explore here, we'll find a collectible that goes towards our next unlock. Ubisoft said they wanted to make the open world interesting to explore, and at least in the first half of the game, they succeed here. You could argue that other Ubisoft games also handle collectibles in the same way, but due to how bloated they've become, there's a high chance something else will be plotted instead. Seeing these markers plotted on the map changes Far Cry from a game with great exploration to a game full of busywork. The best thing about Far Cry 3 is its simplicity. These gameplay systems are streamlined to include only what is absolutely necessary. We don't need a billion currencies that clutter an endless open world. We don't need enemies to have strengths and weaknesses like we're playing rock, paper, scissors. And we definitely don't need a loot system with pointless gear. Nobody from Ubisoft will ever watch this video, but please, we need a complete refresh for Far Cry 7, something smaller, simpler and new. Other parts of the open world and its gameplay systems leave a lot to be desired, and we will talk about that later on, but let's continue with the parts of Far Cry 3 that are still great today.
Insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change.
Vaas is still one of the greatest villains we have in gaming, full stop. Every time Vaas is on screen, the narrative is its most gripping. We're shown this man who's lost his mind, who's paranoid and delusional, where one wrong look from us could be fatal. Ubisoft always makes it clear that Vaas is the threat to us, as we're shown him committing horrific acts throughout the game. We'll see him dancing around as he enjoys dousing hostages in petrol, or tying breeze blocks to people's legs and throwing them into water. It's really interesting, because what I've described are typical villain tropes that I'm sure we've all seen before. But somehow in Far Cry 3, it never feels like that. The first-person perspective is a big part of this, and I can't imagine a Far Cry game working without it. Instead of Vaas speaking to a character in a cutscene, it means he's speaking to us instead. The mocap and overall presentation helped too, as Ubisoft used a photorealistic art style to make everything more real. They avoid the trap that other games fell into around this time, as a lot of characters still had that cartoony look to them, even in other Ubisoft games. A lot of older games feel outdated, as their art style isn't as strong as games today, but Far Cry 3's presentation still holds up extremely well. Ubisoft also took time to develop Vaas as a character, rather than portraying him as a generic villain. He feels completely human, as we spend the game learning more about his backstory and his relationship to other characters. We learn Vaas was actually manipulated by Hoyt, a corrupt businessman and the game's real villain. Hoyt lured Vaas away from his tribe with the promise of money and an endless supply of drugs. And we learn that Citra, the head of his old tribe, is actually his sister. This is a big reveal in the game, and it makes one of Vaas's earlier lines that little bit more special.
I mean, without family, who the fuck are we? There was a time where I'd do anything for my sister. First time I ever killed was for my sister.
But the main reason this works is due to Vaas's design. He's one of the rare villains in gaming whose presence on screen is enough to terrify us by the way he looks alone. In some scenes, Ubisoft drains the colour from his skin as if he's seriously ill, and there's always huge bags under his eyes, like he's been up all week taking Hoyt's drugs. It's such a small detail, but this design means Vaas can simply stare down the barrel of the camera to scare us, always sending shivers down our spines. We always talk about dialogue in games, but it's crazy how much Vaas can say without opening his mouth. While there's definitely other highlights for certain characters and more artistic writing, they're mostly used in minor moments. They're here to add depth to a supporting character, or the relationship between Jason and his crew. The rest of the writing and the overall direction aren't as bulletproof, and these are the parts of Far Cry 3 that don't work today. Take the overall theme of violence in the game, which tries to follow in the footsteps of Far Cry 2. We're supposed to descend into violence the more we play the game, then right before the credits roll, we're asked to make a big decision in one way or another. But there's one big difference between Far Cry 2 and 3, and that's who we're playing as. In Far Cry 2, we played as a mercenary who's been trained to take people's lives in combat. It makes sense that we immediately know how to shoot a weapon or time an explosive charge, as that's our job. But in Far Cry 3, we play as a tourist, a regular guy who's on holiday with his mates who's never shot anyone before in his life.
Yeah. Cash for weapons.
Oh,
You want to save your brother, right?
I've never shot anyone before.
We're also shown Jason isn't violent, as when we defeat our first enemy, his natural reaction is to panic.
I found him!
Shit, oh god.
Both of these moments are showing us that Jason isn't a killer. I do get this, by the way, as Ubisoft are trying to make us feel like Jason, as we'd also be in the same position if this happened to us. But for me, this doesn't work at all, because this premise doesn't align with the gameplay of a first-person shooter. Ideally, we need Jason's journey from tourist to killer to happen gradually. To sell this idea, we need to see him struggling to come to terms with this situation, and stumbling his way through fights until he gets more experienced. This idea does work in TV shows that have more time to develop characters, but in a game, spending the first 4 hours learning how to shoot would be boring and a waste of our time. Jason needs to be able to shoot and know how to reload different weapons from the outset just to make the game work. And this is where we're thrown into unbelievable territory, as what we've been told to believe doesn't match what we're seeing on screen. For instance, Jason will be horrified that he's murdered someone in the first hour of the game, but then in the next we're charging into a base gunning down pirates with an AK-47, or planting bombs on board a ship and escaping before it blows up. Ubisoft tries to get around this by making our powers linked with a magical tattoo, which I'm not opposed to, seeing as Far Cry Instincts gave us powers in a similar way, using a mysterious serum. But in Far Cry Instincts, this idea is easier to get on board with, as everything was supposed to be silly, like a low-budget 60s horror film. If Far Cry 3 was trying to be a tongue-in-cheek adventure like Instincts, then none of this matters. If we're all along for the ride, it's easier to accept over-the-top moments or a ludicrous premise. But because Ubisoft are trying to be serious with these themes of violence, it means it's not as easy to overlook these issues. And this is the main problem, because these serious themes are only one half of the game, whereas the other half is the complete opposite. The other half doesn't care about a poignant message, and all it wants us to do is have fun and enjoy the spectacle. These contrasting ideas create a weird tone, as each side compromises the other. We have characters like Vaas who are exceptional, alongside characters like Herc and Sam who are like caricatures. Sam grew up in Germany, so of course he uses generic German words in his English sentences, like wunderbar and scheiße. And I mean, Herc has a pet monkey that he straps plastic explosives to and tries to blow them up in front of our eyes.
Das ist gut, ja?
No, Sam, that's not good. And look, Herc is DLC, so he's not involved in the main story, and people must like him because he returns later in the franchise. I think I would be able to accept him on his own if these moments made up a tiny part of the game, but there's just too much like this. There's immature dialogue that ruins the magnitude of a mission, or moments where the narrative takes us on random detours like we're playing a different game. Jason and his crew are really bad for this. They've all been kidnapped by Vaas, and some have even been tortured, but for some reason everyone's joking around and cracking one-liners. In one mission where we have to dodge pools of acidic water, Jason makes this light-hearted quip.
Oh man, it smells like sulfur. That or I have really bad BO.
In a tense moment where we're trying to escape in a helicopter, Jason gives his brother this advice.
Oh, we're gonna fucking die, man! This is it, we're gonna die! Just keep going! Okay. What? Oh, I don't know what to do with this, man! Use the force! Oh, thanks! You wanna try?
And after saving Oliver from a small army of pirates, he says the most nonchalant thing ever as soon as we're reunited.
Thanks for saving me. Hey, nice tats, man.
I won't bring up the side mission, where we learn someone's daughter was kidnapped by aliens, but what about the main missions, where we hunt down a magical compass in ancient tombs like we're Indiana Jones? And we won't discuss the mission, where we torch a field of drugs and get high off the fumes. But what about the extremely cliched moment, where a lighter in our pocket stops a bullet and saves our life? I want to highlight that not all of this is bad, as some of these outlandish moments do work. The hallucinating sequences are incredible, especially the Ink Monster boss. But it's when this creativity goes unchecked, and Ubisoft don't question whether a sequence or series of missions actually works in this game. We also can't let Ubisoft off the hook just because it was 2012. Writing generally wasn't as strong in gaming back then, but by this point we already had Red Dead Redemption, Mass Effect and Bioshock. And Far Cry 3 even has examples of good writing in it. As I said earlier, Far Cry 3 feels confused, like it was made by different teams who didn't have the same vision. One team wanted to make a serious game, while the other wanted to joke around and have fun. And while it is fine to have contrasting tones in a game, you have to weave them together carefully. Ubisoft doesn't handle these ideas carefully, and instead smashes them together with no thought. I just can't see where being forced to harm Jason's brother fits alongside this.
Man, this is gonna be epic, man. The Tat Brothers in action, yeah!
Tat Brothers?
Yes, Tat Brothers for life!
Perhaps the most controversial part of Far Cry 3 comes halfway through the game when we take down Vaas. While we have to commend Ubisoft for taking a huge risk, removing Vaas from the game entirely puts pressure on the second half to match up to the first. Because Vaas is such a good character, and this is such a good moment, Ubisoft never quite tops it. And this is for a lot of reasons. We could talk about how Hoyt isn't as good of a villain as Vaas, but really the second half isn't great because of how repetitive it gets. The gameplay loop, which is so strong in the first half, starts to crumble in the second, and this is where the issues start to pile up. Take the collectibles. I actually lied about the collectibles earlier on, as their rewards stop after a certain point. Except for achievements, there's no reward after 6 lost letters, 10 memory cards, or 40 relics. That's 40 relics out of 120 by the way, which means once we've found a third of the main collectibles in the game, there is no reason to find the rest. There's no reason to branch out and explore the map, because we know there's no reward waiting for us. I find this appalling, as I can't think of another game that's designed like this. It would be like finding 33 hidden packages in GTA and not having any more free weapons unlocked at our base, or maxing out our weapon level in Elden Ring after we've played a third of the game. Other developers don't do this, because it would remove one of the main gameplay loops far too early. Activating radio towers does unlock new weapons for us, so we still have fresh guns to shoot in the second half of the game. But unlike the collectibles, we don't have to search for radio towers ourselves. We just plonk down a waypoint and travel over there, or use fast travel points from the menu. We then tick off a radio tower or an outpost and take a beeline to the next. In these moments, Far Cry 3 is like every other Ubisoft game we've played. Ubisoft also made the mistake of not including other elements to counteract this repetition. Other games that have repetitive gameplay keep the experience interesting by giving us something else to make them worthwhile. In AC Origins, Ubisoft gave us an incredible open world, where we got to explore ancient Egypt up close. And more recently, Avowed came under fire for being repetitive, but I thought its fantasy world was great to explore, and the combat was solid. Results will vary on Avowed, as my mate got bored halfway through, but you can probably think of other examples you've enjoyed as well. Unlike these games, the open world in Far Cry 3 isn't interesting enough. Just like the gameplay, it gets repetitive. The jungle setting, which is admittedly stunning, doesn't have enough variety to keep it interesting. There's caves and ruins, World War II bunkers and small towns, but Ubisoft reused them to pad out the map. We'll branch out to explore those interesting points on the horizon, only to get there and realise we've seen it before. And even scrambling through caves with a flashlight gets old after a while, especially when there's no reason to search for collectibles. The map doesn't feel as fresh as the forests of Montana, or as interesting as the Himalayas. It doesn't have the same pull of virtual tourism, as it feels less tangible as a real place. It's more of a generic video game world, especially since Far Cry 1 and Instincts were set in similar locations, complete with shipwrecks, abandoned mines, and science facilities. And look, the elephant in the video is that Far Cry 2 also gets repetitive, but I personally thought the dynamic systems made the game engaging until the end. They added randomness to every encounter, making each shootout feel unique. And unfortunately, a lot of these systems have been gutted in Far Cry 3. The combat, for instance, is a downgrade from Far Cry 2. I get that Ubisoft wanted to make combat less frustrating, but in my opinion they went too far. Now combat has lost its challenge because we have too many mechanics that give us the upper hand. Because we have a detection meter and can tag enemies to see their outline, we no longer have to play carefully during stealth. Because we know when an enemy is about to spot us, it means we can poke out of cover and check it's safe before we make our move. If our detection meter doesn't flag anything, we're good to go, but if it starts to fill up, we know somebody can see us and it's best to retreat. And because we always know the enemy's position once they're tagged, we don't have to plan our movement carefully, as we can tell if they're out of sight or looking the other way. We're never asked to keep track of enemies ourselves, because the game does it for us. I don't like this, because it takes away the best moments in previous Far Cry games. When enemies can spot us realistically across an arena, we're forced to think deeply about each encounter. When we poked out of cover before, it was always tense, because we had no idea who could see us or if they were about to spot us and raise the alarm. But this never happens in Far Cry 3, because we always know who can see us at any moment. These systems make everything less frustrating, but they also make everything less interesting. Turning off these elements in later Far Cry games helps, but this isn't an option here. It's also possible to run rings around the enemy, as their position is plotted on our minimap. Now, instead of using our senses to hear enemy noises, or trying to see their movement through the trees, we just look down to the corner of our screen, and the game tells us where they are. Plus, if an enemy is trying to flank us, we just follow their dot on the minimap and line up our shot when they run round the corner. Even when enemy reinforcements are called into an outpost, all of the intensity is ruined because we know where they're coming from thanks to our comms.
We are coming in from the west.
We then get ourselves in position facing the right way and blow up their vehicle as soon as they turn up. In the second half of the game, Ubisoft tried to make combat harder, as they throw more heavy units at us that take longer to kill, or they'll send in an attack chopper. But by this point in the game, we've already upgraded our gear and we can easily deal with these threats. We learn to always carry an RPG to one-shot helicopters, or keep a shotgun or LMG with us to take down heavies. And we know that it's good to keep stocked up on grenades and healing items. I mean, should we really be able to carry 12 grenades at once, or 6 shots for the RPG, or 12 syringes that instantly refill our 6 health bars? Just like the mechanics that give us the advantage, having all this gear takes away the challenge. We rarely have to play strategically, because Ubisoft has wrapped us in cotton wool. Most of the time, if we're fully stocked on ammo and syringes, we can brute force our way through encounters with no thought. To be clear, I played Far Cry 3 on the highest difficulty for the second half of the game, and this didn't fix these problems. The issues we're discussing aren't linked with damage dealt, and I'm definitely not saying we need bullet sponges or one-shot kills. What this is actually about is how aggressive the enemies are. Generally, they take too long to open fire once we've been spotted, which means we always have time to attack them before they attack us. We can run into a group of enemies and take them down before they even register we're there. Or we can easily dispatch enemies who should have an advantage against us. I never felt challenged as I moved through the world, as we're left to roam freely through the jungle too often. I rarely crossed paths with enemies, and when I did, it was normally 2 or 3 patrolling guards at once. And because of their slow reaction times, they can easily be dispatched. In fact, the most hostility we ever see is from Far Cry 3's wildlife. These dynamic systems like the wildlife arguably keep the game interesting when the combat and open world falters. And I do partly agree with this. Something completely random can happen to us as we move through the world, and that's special because it makes everyone's playthrough unique. But although this was incredible in 2012, it's just not the same today, as these mechanics have been bled dry by Ubisoft over the years. The animal cages, for instance, which were a genius idea in 2012, have been used across multiple Ubisoft games, even those outside the Far Cry franchise. Rather than all of this being revolutionary today, it's just standard Ubisoft. So, after everything we've discussed, is Far Cry 3 still great? That is in the context of today, by the way. This series looks at how great games from the past hold up today. Well, it's easy to see why Far Cry 3 is hailed by some as a masterpiece. Far Cry 3 has not only had a long-lasting impact on the gaming industry, but some of its parts are still exceptional today, from its fun gameplay loop, stunning presentation, and its outstanding villain. As I played through the first half of the game, all of this was true, and those great memories I had playing Far Cry 3 with my mates at university came flooding back. But the systems that worked in the first half of the game run out of steam in the second, and the gameplay becomes repetitive. Partly this is due to Ubisoft's over-reliance on this design over the years, which obviously makes Far Cry 3 less impressive today, but mostly it's due to the choices Ubisoft made in 2012. And when this is combined with some immature writing, poor handling of serious themes, unchallenging combat, and an open world that's not as memorable as the best out there, Far Cry 3 leaves a lot to be desired. And it's for these reasons that Far Cry 3 isn't still great. It is a good game, and definitely worth replaying, but in the end, it's just more Far Cry.